This is the Prairie Weekly. I'm Dave Thompson. Thanks for joining us today. Our guest is North Dakota's new Tourism Promotions Director, Kevin Cramer. Kevin, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Dave.
Did I get the title right, by the way? Tourism Promotions Director, or is it
I think
Tourism
it's Director of the Department of Tourism, or it's kind of hard to say because, you know, we really aren't our own department yet.
Yeah, not till August 1st.
August 1st.
That's right.
To that point, we're married to Parks, and I understand that a couple of years ago when they created this joint Parks and Tourism agency, they had a marriage ceremony, so we're now planning the divorce ceremony, and we're looking for a good judge, you know, if you don't...
Maybe Judge Pat Conley might be available.
He'd be very appropriate, I think, yeah.
Anyway, I'd just like to start out by asking you, you're moving over from the executive director and chairman of the Republican Party to tourism. What made you decide to seek the tourism position?
Well, it's funny because I did not intend on doing that. I had some offers in the private sector. The timing was such in my personal and political life at my young age, and given my experience, that it seemed like a good time for me to explore other opportunities because, we had a very successful election, the best one the party's had in 12 years. It seemed like a nice time to get away from politics and use it to my advantage, some of my experiences, and yet when I really looked at things in government, the one thing that had some appeal to me was tourism, because I love this state, I always have. Was born and raised here, and I've always been involved in promotion of whether it's the state or the people, and it's very similar to being a member of the Republican National Committee, for example, from a small state. I know the uphill climb that we have, and so it just seemed like the kind of position that I would enjoy. The other thing was that it just seemed to me, it kind of haunted me, and in my discussions with my wife even, we both came to the conclusion that when you spend 8 years in government or in politics on the outside criticizing the current administration at the time for whatever, and that's an appropriate role for political parties, that when you then go into power, I felt a sense of responsibility to now put up or shut up, as they say. And so now it's our turn at bat, and if you're going to affect policy, you can't just always do it from the critic's corner, but sometimes you got to take your turn at bat, and so I just feel an obligation to do that, and I'm looking very, very forward to the challenge. So
in that role, are you going to be in the Schaefer kitchen cabinet, so to speak, or?
Well, I guess I'm literally on his cabinet. Yes. Whether I'm in his kitchen cabinet, I guess my first priority in this role, of course, and is to be a good tourism director and do the best job I can as tourism director. My new role politically is to affect politics through good policy. There's no, you've heard the saying that the best politics is good policy. Is now my role. I now have a role in that policy side of things. So to that extent, I'm certainly going to be involved with the governor politically because he believes in the politics of performance, and hopefully I'll perform well, which will reflect good on him. Now, as far as being in his kitchen cabinet, whether I went into the private sector, government, remained in politics, whatever, Ed Schaefer's a friend of mine, and I would offer any advice that he asked, but probably we'll wait for him to ask.
Seems like it's a good place for party insiders to go, I guess, tourism, because Jim Fugely was your predecessor. Did he give you any advice when you took the job? Yeah,
he did. As a matter of fact, my first day on the job, Jim was one of the first phone calls I got. To simply say that he would be willing to help in any way that he could, and then to invite me to the Medora Roundup this weekend. But the one piece of advice he did give me was, from now until fall, spend your time going to the attractions and getting to know the state and getting to know all these attractions and events that are going on, and then get to know how the office runs in the fall. But he said, right now it's important that you get out and get to know your state. So I've been trying to do that as much as I can.
A lot of miles in the car.
A lot of miles already. I've been on the job just a little over a week, and I've literally made that truck that so many politicians referred to with a sigh from Wahpeton to Williston. And so I was in Wahpeton on Monday looking at and touring their zoo and their Prairie Rose Carousel that they're so proud of and have good reason to be, in the Bag Bonanza Farm in Morton. And yesterday I spent the day up at Fort Union and Fort Buford and in Williston. So I've already put on the miles.
Well, let me ask you if you've got any specific goals in mind for tourism in North Dakota.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I have to say along that line, I have to compliment my predecessor, Jim Fugly. He did an excellent job of raising tourism to a new height, certainly to a new level of importance in this state for funding and attention, and it's a very important industry in North Dakota. It is a growth industry at a time when we need some growth in our economic impact. So I don't see any reason to make any drastic changes at this point. One of the things that the department has done recently is they drafted a master plan, which is a long-term development plan, and they also have, of course, marketing plans. And I guess, and I've read the marketing plan and the master plan, and I guess I'd have to say that I don't think it would be very productive of me to now change all that and start from ground zero. You'd lose the impact or the advantage of the work that they did, and it was good work. And so, I'm one that believes in plans. Ed Schaefer is one who believes in plans and having a roadmap and sticking to it, and whether it's in a campaign or whether it's in tourism or business or whatever. And so I see us sticking to that course pretty, strongly. I think sometimes when new blood comes in, it allows you to maybe get moving a little faster. Hopefully, I can do that. Push it along a little faster. I don't have a marriage to the research side of it, and so I think I'm fortunate in that regard.
North Dakota has always been seen as a pass-through state rather than a destination state. Does that make your job harder?
Well, it's funny because it does, but one of the things we have going for us, of course, is good roads, and so I guess what we have to do then is take advantage of that. You make lemonade out of a lemon. Some of the thoughts I've had as I've researched and looked at traffic patterns and whatnot, everyone says, well, our real competition is South Dakota. Well, I'm not so sure that's true. South Dakota has a wonderful destination in Mount Rushmore. It's a very difficult thing to compete with. But what I find is that when people vacation, when they tour, they make loops. And so most people that are, say, coming from Minneapolis or Wisconsin or Winnipeg or whatever, if they're going west, they're either on their way out west or on their way back east are going to probably stop at Mount Rushmore in Rapid City. There are lots of places and things to do there. My challenge, I think, when I look at that kind of a traveler is to get them on their way either out or back to take I-94 or some route through North Dakota as opposed to Nebraska, for example. But it's our job. My job is to promote the state and create new wealth by bringing people into the state, tourists and visitors into the state. It is the job of the industry then to service those people and to entertain those people and keep those people here.
And what you're saying, though, is that North Dakota does have some things to offer.
No question about it.
And those are some strengths you can play on.
No question. We have many things. I'm learning more and more all the time as I've been spending a good deal of time on the road, as you know. And there are lots of things to do here. If we can get people to across the borders, we can keep them here a long time. We're so rich in heritage and in history and culture and clean air and open spaces and flowers and greenery and it just so many things to offer. So once we get them here, we believe we can keep them here. Lots of little attractions. We need to do more to promote our small town museums, for example. And one of the things, and I think an area that I think we could use some real improvement on, and I've noticed as I've been traveling now lately, is that we could use some help in signage. And I don't know where that fits into the master plan and all of those things, but it is one area that I've noticed that we maybe are lacking in a little bit, and getting people to spend more time here.
Let me explore that a little bit, because that has been an issue that's been discussed in legislative sessions. Where do you see the lacks are in signs? Is it a case that we don't have enough tourist-oriented signs?
Well, I think it is. Not only that, but even when you come across our border, when you go into South Dakota or you go into another state, you see these big, beautiful signs welcoming you to the state, kind of a welcome message from the governor. And we don't have that. We have kind of institutional-looking signs. And I've had that comment made to me by people who visit our state. Well, then, just yesterday, for example, when I was up in Williston, it's very difficult to find a sign pointing you to Fort Buford or to Fort Union. Yet they're wonderful attractions. And we've found, in fact, they pointed out to me a couple of very, very small signs with arrows showing you which way to go, and they were all shot up. And those are the kinds of things that a very, what would, relatively speaking, a small expenditure would reap very good dividends. And I just think we need to pay more attention. Another example was the Tourist Information Center. We have 8 of them across the state. We have one in Williston. And I drove into Williston looking for the Tourist Information Center, and it is right across a road, or kind of a parking lot, really, from the Game and Fish office and their driver's license division. I'm sorry, not the Game and Fish. Game and Fish is out on the highway with Highway Patrol, but it is the driver's license division. There's this huge sign that says North Dakota Driver's License Division, and then there's a real small sign that you wouldn't even notice if you weren't looking for it, saying Information Center. Well, if you can't even get people to the Information Center, you're going to have a hard time, then steering them out to the attractions.
So it's something like that wouldn't be necessarily a huge expense.
Not at all.
That might help
in big ways. In big ways, and like I say, I'm just learning the ropes, so I don't even know what possibilities there are for funding something like that. But I suspect that is that a responsibility of tourism? Is that a responsibility of DOT? Is that a responsibility of of the parks? Who knows? But I'm certainly going to look into that, and that is an area that we can make some improvements on.
One thing that your predecessor did was get a lot of money, relatively speaking, a lot of money, that is, compared to what we spent in tourism in the past.
Exactly.
For things like television buys,
Yes.
especially targeting markets in Canada and in the Twin Cities and things like that. Successful, not successful? Is that a good use of the money?
I think it's a very good use of the money. Their strategy at the time, previous to that, was they did have many fewer dollars. They did a lot of print advertising, which was fine, but what they did is they kind of shotgunned it. They had ads in national publications that reached a lot of people, and they weren't real big ads, and the return was minimal. And so they went to what they call proximity advertising, and they did higher level production, television, as you said, for the most part, and then targeted toward proximity markets such as Minneapolis and then southern Saskatchewan and Manitoba. And I think it has proven to be very successful, and we'll continue that, although we're going to get back into a little more, again, into subscription types of advertising, niche advertising, for example.
Targeted
advertising, yeah. So.
Well, you're probably then talking about advertising to fishing magazines, to promote Sakakawea,
Sure.
and to maybe travel type magazines that promote bus tours and things like that.
Well, bus tours are a really big part of what we do. A motor coach touring is very popular, and it's a huge part of our business. In fact, I just got a memo today from Jim Fugly showing me their June schedule of motor coach tours to Medora. It's incredible. It's an incredible part of our market. But the thing is about publications too is that it's not just advertising, but it's what you can do with the writers to get them to promote your area as well. And that's why we and Jim was very good at this. This was really his niche, was bringing these writers in, going hunting and fishing with them, make sure they have a good experience here, and then they write about it.
Do you hunt?
I do not hunt.
Do you fish?
I do fish.
Okay.
I love to fish and look forward to doing that. But that is a niche that Jim had that I don't, and we'll have to fill that gap another way. And I've already begun exploring those possibilities with other outdoorsmen.
But you have willing people who are willing to take
very much
outdoor
so.
writers out. Yeah.
Oh yes, very much so.
I have a question on a related topic, and I'm just very curious as to how you feel as tourism director about the coming reservation gambling and what that might bode for tourism in North Dakota. Do you see it having much of an effect at all?
Well, my opinion is not a professional one necessarily, because I don't really know. I guess it's one of those things where if you're not doing it nowadays, then you're probably losing somewhere along the line. On the other hand, if you are into it, you're probably lucky to hold your own, given the fact that everybody around us is doing it. And so I guess obviously the novelty has worn off in gaming. I doubt that it has a long term net effect for our society or for our economy. I don't know. I am not I don't feel adamant one way or the other about the subject, but obviously, as long as we have it, and if we're going to have it, then we should be promoting it. And I'd rather have people gambling in North Dakota than in Minnesota or South Dakota.
I was thinking about Mystic Lake and the Mahnomen Shooting Star.
Yeah, we might as well compete with them, because there's a lot of people from North Dakota going to those places, and I'd just as soon have them. If that's how they're going to spend their dollars, I'd like to have them spend them here.
What do you feel about the bigger issue of privatized gambling?
Well, I'm not a gambling proponent to begin with. I don't think it's a good way to base an economy at all. But again, it seemed to be successful. It seemed to be peaceful when it was, charitable gaming on a small scale, and it's only gotten complicated as time has gone on, and it's become divisive, and that's unfortunate. And it's become divisive within our industry, within the tourism or convention visitors type of industry, and that's unfortunate. And I don't think that I gain much by getting in the middle of that controversy, because we have friends on both sides of it. But I'm not a real proponent of expanded gaming. I just have a moral and concern about it. But on the other hand, again, everybody's got their own conscience and can make up their own mind about those things. I don't want us to get beaten by other states when we could be in the arena.
Would it be a fair statement to say that for North Dakota and for your job promoting tourism, that gambling is only an adjunct, it's not a destination type thing?
That would be a very fair statement. I don't think anybody's going to travel great distances to play, to do the type of gambling that we can offer in North Dakota or even in Minnesota. I do think it is an adjunct. I think that if Canadians like to come to North Dakota because they like to swim in the swimming pool at the at the hotel, they like to shop, they like what's available to them and the cost of it, considering the exchange rate is right and the gas is the right price, and then while they're here they might play blackjack or pull tabs. But I don't think it's what draws people to North Dakota.
How do you feel about the Canadian situation? Do you think, have we peaked as far as Canada's
Well, I
concerned?
guess my opinion has been for years that at least the past few years, is that it was obvious to me anyway that the Canadian government wasn't going to let us just they weren't going to stand at the border and watch us out migration every Friday and wave at them all as they came back in on Sundays, and so obviously they've reacted. And we have no control over that. We certainly can't control what Canadians do in marketing their own country, and they ought to do that, I guess. But on the other thing we have no control over is the exchange rate, and those things are the real issues at hand. In the meantime, Canadians we know like to come to North Dakota. They'd like to come to the United States, and we happen to be the first stop along the way. And so that'll never change. And I think as long as we can always, offer them something, they'll always come. But it's a battle. Now we have a little friendly rivalry going on along those lines. I would like to see, one of the things I'd like to see is us do, and I know that Governor Schaefer talked about this even in his campaign, is let's form a corridor coalition with Manitoba and Saskatchewan and our surrounding states, and then let's go after an international market. And what a wonderful focal point, what more wonderful focal point to do that within our International Peace Guard.
I remember something like that being talked about 12 years ago. I was privileged to attend a meeting in Winnipeg, Manitoba, as a matter of fact, working for a Grand Forks radio station, where they started talking about this heartland concept where you had Manitoba, Saskatchewan, the Dakotas, Minnesota, Montana. So that's the kind of thing you're looking at.
That'd be
perhaps
exactly what we're looking at. And Europeans, for example, and a lot of other parts of the world, are fascinated with the West. And there's a sex appeal with George Custer and Theodore Roosevelt and Lewis and Clark and the Wild West. And there's a real glamorous appeal when you get out of this country with all of that. And I just think, I don't think any one of us probably, even as large as Minnesota's budget is, probably can't afford to spend a lot of the resources necessary to saturate a market on our own. But as a coalition or as a corridor, I think we could. And in this society of very peaceful, with a real peace conscientiousness, I think that this International Peace Garden and the peaceful coexistence of these two major countries has even more appeal to these international markets.
we could go on and on about some of the things that are going on. I'm going to have you back a little bit later on after the summer tourist season. We'll talk about it. But in the few minutes I have left, I'd like to just switch gears and talk about party for a little bit.
Sure.
What kind of legacy do you think you leave the Republican Party?
Well, I think there's lots of things that you look back on and you're happy about, and some things you'd probably do differently. But the main thing is, and I've always said this, that the party exists really for one major reason, and then there's a secondary reason. The major reason is to elect the people that, to elect your candidates. And then the other is in the meantime, is to be the watchdog of the other party and to make sure that you're provided checks and balances. And I think that's one thing I did fairly well. I was aggressive with the media. I liked the media, and I think we brought the party into a little higher level of awareness and some credibility with the public. And then the other one with regard to electing Republicans, I guess the one thing I've always said is one thing about my job was that there's a day of reckoning. There's a gauge, a yardstick, if you will, and it's the day after the election or the evening of the election. And the fact is, we had the most successful election that we've had in 12 years, and elected the number one seat in North Dakota, and that being the governor. And he deserves most, if not nearly all, the credit for that. But it still can't be done without a decent apparatus. And so I guess that's what I would consider as my legacy going out.
It's always been common, conventional political wisdom in North Dakota that the Democrats have always had a good farm team, and the Republicans were a little bit less so. But given the gains that the Republicans made in '92, is that changing?
Well, I think the future is very bright for the party with regard to that. And you look at our leadership in the legislature. We have some bright young leaders in the legislature. You look at having a governor obviously makes all the difference in the world, because first of all, you have a wonderful candidate recruitment tool, you have a wonderful fundraising tool, and you also have he helps create that farm team within his cabinet and within his administration, while putting good qualified people in place and before the public while they perform in public service.
Is there something that was left undone you would like to have had more time to do?
I'd like to have had another day of maybe to run some more TV ads to get Rod Backman elected tax commissioner. There's always those kinds of things. But yeah, there always are, Dave. I mean, there are always things, it seems like everybody that steps into a position of leadership has certain talents that they use, and generally the time, the circumstances surrounding the timing somewhat dictate not only who becomes the leader of an organization, or in this case the political party, but then how that person performs, and you try to fill in the gaps that were there before. But while you do that, then other gaps are created, and so there's always some things that you do differently. But all in all, I have to say I've had a very good run and enjoyed it very, very much.
Well, you had the dual role of chairman and executive director. When we talked to John Korsmo, who's now announced that he's going to be a candidate for the chairmanship, he said he'd like to have that job split again.
If I were to have run for another term, I would have done the same thing. Again, 2 years ago when we did it, we dealt with with what we had, I guess, and at that time the right thing to do was what we did. I think today, given the fact we have a governor now, and of course a lot of that again is dictated by the personalities involved in the situation with the individual. And we've done it both ways. It seems like every other chairman does it the other way, And but I just think the timing is such that John is exactly right, and I would agree wholeheartedly with him.
Your thoughts about who might be the next chairman?
Well, my thoughts are that the best thing for me to do is not get involved.
I understand that.
To this point, there's one candidate, John Korsmo, and I think that John is a superb candidate. And John really got me started in politics when I was a student at Concordia College in Moorhead, and he was the chairman of the United Republican Committee in Fargo, and he had me come over. And I was doing voter identification calling in the evenings, and that's really how I got my start in politics.
Is it going to be hard for you to take off the partisan hat now?
I don't think so. You would think that, but yet one thing I found, and I've found that even throughout politics, even when I was the party chairman and in the heat of battle, the one thing about it was, I could put out a news release or hold a news conference and criticize some policy of a congressman or a senator or the governor or anybody else, but yet later on that day would bump into them and would have a handshake and visit, and the one thing that you always got to keep in mind, that I always tried to keep in perspective, is that with very few exceptions, we're all in this together. We all want what's best for this country and for this state, and we just have different ways of going about it. So as long as you keep that perspective, I think that it'll be okay. But no, I don't think there'll be a problem. I'm very anxious to be a public servant.
I guess that's some people seem to forget about that, is that you do have a role to play as loyal opposition, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything personal. Not at all.
In fact, not at all. I think you'd find, if you talked even to most of the Democrats that were in power at the time, that we really never had anything personal against each other, and ever that I can think of anyway, and that we all understood our role very well.
And besides, politics is fun.
Politics is a lot of fun. Absolutely.
But tourism sounds like it's going to be fun for you.
It is. It's just, of all the jobs in government, it is the one I've always thought I would enjoy the most. I think I'm cut out to do, and I hope that I can do our state proud.
In the few minutes we have remaining, give me your prediction for this tourist season in North Dakota. We've had more rain now.
Mm-hmm.
You said in the tour, before we went on air, that things look pretty green.
Mm-hmm.
It's looking pretty nice around the state. Is this going to be a good year?
I think it's going to be a great year. I've never seen it look greener out west than it. It's certainly not in the last 8 to 10 years. It's just looking wonderful. The concern I have about the weather and about this green, of course, is caused by rain, and we've had a fair amount of rainy, cool weather, and coming on the heels of a summer like we had last summer, which was rainy and cool. And you think of, for example, the Medora musical, which opens this weekend. They had like 7 or 8 rainouts last year. Well, that's very hard on the tourism industry, and I get a little concerned that people start seeing the weather pattern and going, oh no, it's going to be another summer like last summer. Let's head south instead of north. But again, there's nothing we can do about that. God has given us a beautiful creation out here in North Dakota, and we hope that we can, the people will come out and see it.
If all goes well, good balance of rain and sunshine then.
Exactly. If we can have a lot of days like we're having today with, for 3, 4, or 5 days in a row, and then a day of rain, we'll take it.
All right. Kevin, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you, Dave. It's my pleasure.
Our guest today on the Prairie Weekly, North Dakota's new tourism director, Kevin Cramer. And for the Prairie Weekly, I'm Dave Thompson.
Each week we receive a number of requests from students and journalists for copies of the Prairie Weekly. If you'd like to receive a copy for your own personal use, the telephone number to call is 1-800-767-1929. Be prepared to specify the air date of the program you are ordering. The number again to call is 1-800-767-1929.